Hi, I'm Michael Goodfriend. I'm the executive producer of In the Cards, and I have real royalty with me right now. An extraordinary actor, Chukwudi Iwuji, who gives us the voice of Professor Peter Towers. He has been in many, many films and television series. He is in the Marvel universe. He has performed with extraordinary actors both on stage and in film and on HBO Max. But most importantly, he gives us the voice of Professor Peter Towers. His name is Chukwudi Iwuji. Chukwudi, welcome to the bonus content series for In the Cards.
Thank you so much for having me. This is fun. Greetings
It's
from London, by the way, you know.
Yes. Now, what brings you to London? Why are you in London?
Oh, I'm here with spending some time with my family and also working on a project which I have to be kind of secretive about and stuff.
Mm.
That's filming in London, Budapest, and Croatia. So it's a long, I don't know whether I need to be secretive. Yeah, I think I do. You know,
Can
all
you?
these NDAs, very, very different from our podcast, basically.
Yes,
So,
I should
yeah.
say. I should say so. I feel like I have to be very, I have to get very prim and proper to do this interview because you work in such high levels, and you have. I say your royalty because you got your start as an actor at a royal place, the Royal Shakespeare Company in
Yeah.
England. Can you tell us
Yes.
how you got there?
It was always a dream because for me, a lot of the actors I admired had come through the RSC, as we call it, whether it was going back to Peter O'Toole, Richard Burton, Judi Dench, Maggie Smith, they'd all come through, all my heroes of acting. So when I was studying in the States in drama school, I mean, the conversation we would have was we would watch those videos of speaking Shakespeare and stuff, led by John Barton or Cicely Berry, those videos we would study with, was that one day, just like Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen on those videos, I'm going to join the RSC, even if it takes 10 years knocking on their door, as it happened for me. I moved back to London, and my first audition a week later was with the Royal Shakespeare Company, and I got in, and it was wonderful because I playing spear carry roles, tiny roles, the soothsayer, and Julius Caesar, one of the ambassadors in Hamlet, the one that doesn't speak much. But I did get a chance to understudy some major roles and watch from the wings, and I did get to work with legends like the late great John Barton and Cicely Berry, who were my voice teachers and text coaches and stuff on a daily basis. I took full advantage of that sort of academic side of working at the Royal Shakespeare Company. So that was my first professional job in England when I moved back, and they became a real home to me because I went back a few years later to play Ophidius in Coriolanus and Fenton in Merry Wives of Windsor. Then the really huge one was the recently deceased Sir Michael Boyd, who was a dear friend as well as being a collaborator, hired me to play Henry VI in the history cycle, which was just a huge coup for the RSC, and really was, I'd say, it was a big stepping stone in my career to do that.
You say you went back to
Mhm.
England to join the RSC. Where had you been before then?
I studied undergrad at Yale University, so I did economics there of all things. And while I was there, I did a couple of plays, and one of the plays I did, the head of undergrad drama at Yale saw me. It was a production of Becket, and I was playing Becket, and he offered me a full scholarship to the University of Wisconsin Milwaukee Conservatory, the professional theater training program in Milwaukee. He offered me a scholarship because he was about to become artistic director of the program. And I studied there for 3 years and, worked in the area while I was studying. I was very lucky to get a lot of professional experience while I was in those 3 years. And one of which was with the American Players Theater in Spring Green, Wisconsin, which is huge. I mean, they really nurtured me also. Before the RSC, I would say my nurturing with classics came working with those guys, the Jimmy DeVitas and Jonathan Smoots, and just amazing performers out there. And
I,
then
my I
I
have to
moved.
interject here because my wife is there right now doing a one-woman
Oh
show
my,
at American
oh
Players Theater.
my God. So
Shout
Brenda
out to
DeVita at the time,
APT.
APT people,
That's
Brenda
where I
DeVita
grew
at the
up.
time was, oh my God, I would spring green. It was such a big coup
Yeah.
for my drama school because every actor in my drama school was hoping they would come and take them there after they graduated to get the experience. I was lucky enough after they came to David Frank, who
Oh,
was the
sure.
artistic director at the time. David, he would always come do workshops and work with the students. And it was my second year, and he came to do a workshop and liked what I did. And that summer, after my second year, they hired me, which was a real coup because that never happened. And they hired me to, and I believe I did Albany and King Lear and Don Pedro in What to Do About Nothing. And then the
Wow.
summer after I graduated, I went back and played Florizel in A Winter's Tale and Hippolytus in Phaedra, back when I was a leading man. So like, it
I
was
have to tell my
wonderful, you know.
parents because they go to see all of APT's plays. I grew up 6 miles from that theater. That's where
Wow,
I got
wow.
my start in this whole uh,
It's
world. So
crazy
I'm sure they
world.
saw you. I'm sure they saw you.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was the crazy time. Such great talent and you know, um, everyone just like was so good. And I remember learning a lot from them, and they cared about the classics. They really, and you know how actors would, they formed, that was my first full experience of a company
Mhm.
of actors that knew each other, that grew with each other and shared the roles and had their moments of shining and their moments of being ensemble and still, giving everything that
I'm
they could with it, you know?
I'm curious to know. So you worked at American Players Theater, which is,
Hmm.
as you say, just a great repertory theater company that's in the
Yeah,
middle of the continental
nowhere.
United States in Wisconsin, right? Yeah, people drive from all over. There's literally nothing around there. I mean, well, there is. There's
Yeah.
incredible natural beauty, but
Beauty and the shed.
oh,
Remember the shed?
now
Oh,
now
many a drink.
defunct. I hate to tell you this, but
I
it is no
know it
longer
broke
there.
my heart too. I lived above the shed. They had
Oh my
apartment buildings, so
God.
I lived above the shed, and there was such a the idea that the shed doesn't exist where we could all congregate like we just did. It's a bit like the Dirty Duck in Stratford upon Avon. This
Yeah.
one place that's
Or
traditionally belongs to
Martino's
the actors.
at Oregon Shakespeare Festival was Martino's,
Right.
but there is another place now called the Slow Poke that Michael Bro started. Michael Bro, one of the
Right.
folks that works at APT all the time, and so
All
that's the
right,
new
cool.
hangout. That's where everybody hangs.
All right, okay. To be
But
fair, the shed always looked like it was on the edge of something not quite right.
well, really, really going deep here. I actually,
Yeah,
as a graduate of River Valley High School in Spring Green, I can tell you that the shed really was on the edge of
on the
something.
edge.
Yes,
Propriety. On
yes.
the edge of propriety,
I
yes.
mean, we're talking, this is rural Wisconsin,
Mm,
but
hmm.
I remember hearing Derek Jacobi, an RSC great, talking about how what that American actors should go to the regions and should go work at places like American Players Theater to learn about working in rep. And this is, of course, back when
Mm,
we had a real regional theater. Now, sadly, they're all sort of starting to fade, and
mm.
APT is one of few now. But I'm curious to know what it was like for you having gone, really cut your teeth at APT and then going to the RSC. Were there a lot of similarities? What are the differences and the similarities between repertory companies like APT and RSC?
Well, might surprise you here to say not much
Mm.
difference. I think, in fact, I'm deeply grateful for, I mean, APT especially for people that don't know it, at least when I was there, the standard of theater was a classical speaking text and
Oh yeah.
embracing text was just like nowhere else. I would say in the country, it was of another level, and it was a real gem. And that's why people traveled from Chicago, from all over to come there and work there. So I would say that APT is a big reason why I was able to make that transition into the RSC. I remember the late great Stephen Pimlott, the first director that I had a meeting with at the RSC that fateful week when I arrived back in London, just saying to me, I just love the way the muscularity of how you're using the language And that was the combination, and that was the combination of sort of mid-Atlantic, you know, how Americans chew their words more, whereas the Brits are sort of more trippingly on the tongue. So there was a weird combination of both, which I sort of developed at APT, the attention to text, you know. So I would say that it wasn't that different. I mean, the difference was that suddenly those legends of the game were suddenly in the rehearsal rooms with me and stuff like that. And we know that suddenly, you know, the badge is more internationally known. And I did get to work with, like I said, Cicely Berry and John Barton, and then the directors that were there, like Stephen Pimlett and Edward Hall and so forth, and later Sir Michael Boyd. But really, I'm happy to say that APT was a big part. I think without APT, I'm not sure I would have got into the RSC so quickly. I think it really prepped me. I wasn't intimidated beyond this was the place of my dreams, which everyone has. I wasn't intimidated technically to start the process because drama school doesn't make you an actor. It just gives you the tools to become an actor. So I felt that those seasons I'd had with APT really prepared me to speak text so that at the RSC in those auditions, whether they took me or not, I wasn't intimidated by the text or my delivery and stuff because I had studied all that, you know? So, but what the Brits in general, if I were to say a big difference with the theatre there, and here's the fact that, and that's why Derek Jacobi was saying what he was saying, is that we have a culture of apprenticeship with places like the RSC, the National, the Crucible, the, you know, the playhouses and stuff like that, of where actors coming out of drama school can go and learn their trade for a period of time, joining these companies, these theater companies. That a lot of American actors, when you're done with drama school, you're sort of thrown out into the wind. You know what I mean? There isn't places where you can go and disappear in your 20s and come out in your 30s seasoned and haven't been guaranteed season after season and work after work and growing with the roles. You're sort of thrust into the same stage as people that have been doing it for 10, 20 years ahead of you, that are whatever, you're competing in that sense, you know, as opposed to somewhere where you go and like I did with the RSC, it's like, okay, I'm just starting off. I'll play Cornelius the ambassador, I'll play whatever, but I'll watch the guys that I want to emulate.
Yeah.
I'll watch, you know, Sam West doing his Hamlet and dream on my Hamlet. I'll take advantage of the sessions with John Barton and Cicely Berry so that when I go on for that understudy run, I'm ready to do Anthony and Anthony Clip. And that's what the RSC noticed. They noticed that when I did that. And that's why they called me back to do, you know, Ophidius, and why I was in the Reckoning for Henry VI.
By the way,
you know?
Ophidius, a great,
you know?
great role in Coriolanus.
Brilliant role.
I mean,
brilliant
I think,
role.
frankly, the best role. I mean,
it's for me. I mean, I'll disagree with you because I love Coriolanus, but I would completely accept the argument that Ophidius could technically be the better role in his extreme complexity, how he turns on a that, you know. But I would say that's the big difference, is that we have these establishments, not so much now as far as funding was, but at the time I came out, where there was plenty of funding to develop as an actor, to develop as a performer, to learn your craft without the pressure of the West End or Broadway. Do you know what I mean? You would, you know, and get better. Whereas American actors are sort of thrust into the wind as soon as they graduate, and they're competing for roles that are going to movie stars or people that have been on Broadway for ages. The best you can hope for is to be a swing or an understudy, or for someone to be specifically looking for someone really young for the role, maybe if you're lucky. And we had these meccas to disappear to and just train and get better, you know. So that's a big difference, you know.
Here, I want to take us back on a thread of esoterica, if you don't mind. The APT journey. You did John Wick too.
Yes.
Yes. There's an actor who's part of the John Wick series, named Randall Duck Kim. Did you?
Of course, John. Is Randall part of John Wick? I thought Randall was part of the
well, he was in the Matrix. He's in the Matrix series.
Yeah.
And I think I know he's
I didn't work with Randall. I didn't. If he was Randall was a legend when I joined APT. I didn't work with him. He had left APT by the time I joined. I literally missed him. But people like Lee Ernst
Oh yeah,
and all that had all been students of Randall. Well, I don't know if students the right word,
the
but
proteges.
influenced by Randall. Yes, and APT is very much Randall's baby in its development. So I missed Randall, but I would hear so many stories about his performances, his layer, his this, his that. But I never got to work with him. But yes, he is part of the Matrix world, and I guess he is part of the. I just didn't. Honestly,
I just was
my work
wondering
in John Wick
if
2
when
was
you were on the set of John Wick, if you guys crossed paths and you could make that connection. But
no, never did.
I would be remiss to say, listeners, that my wife, who's working at APT, is Nancy Rodriguez, and she plays Monica in our series. She is the cheese curl girl. So connecting that thread. And speaking of threads, one of our wandering threads from In the Cards, the man without whom we couldn't have done this series, Kevin Henderson, has just joined us. He is the writer and director of In the Cards. And I woke him up to do this.
A bit late, but yeah, hello, everyone.
It's 7:30 on
Some
the
fatherly
West Coast.
duties got in the way and took a little bit more time this morning than I had anticipated. So I do
Fatherly
apologize.
duties. What do you can't pull one over on us, Kevin. I know I woke you up out of bed. I know.
I know a hangover when I see one. I see a few tequila sunrises when I see one.
Chukwudi, he always looks like this. This is just how Kevin looks.
This looks good for me.
You look great. You look great. You look very tanned. You look a lot more tanned than I last saw you, Kevin.
Well,
have you been away?
I was playing a lot of soccer yesterday, so in the sun out in California, and I scored, so that's good.
Excellent. Excellent.
Kevin, you're interrupting Chukwudi's brilliant biography here. We're just
I was catching most of it. It was, but continue.
So okay, Chukwudi, you're there. You're in London. You're performing at the RSC. Suddenly, you're playing Ophidius in enviable, great role in on the RSC stage. When do you start doing film work?
I was desperate to try film work because I'm going to be honest. The whole Shakespeare and theater thing was almost accidental. When I chose to become an actor, finally, after having toyed with it as a kid and done some acting, when I got to, in fact, the whole reason I was in America, guys, was because I suspected I wanted to be an actor. And the thing is that in England, the educational system starts narrowing down your choices very early. GCSEs, then A level, and you go to university to study law or medicine and stuff. You don't have the liberal arts thing or the undergrad thing in that sense, where you have at least 2 years to decide what you want to do, and then you start focusing, and then go to grad school. Like if I was going to do, like I thought I was going to do, sort of something like commercial law, international law, or something, I would have gone to university with that as my major. But I knew I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I suspected there was a side that might want to be an actor. So of course you go, I need to get to America. That's the home of Dirty Harry and Star Wars and all those things I watched, and even Richard Burton. When I think of the movie of Becket, that was a big influence in me. I should remind me to come back to that. It's an amazing story, it really is. So I said to my dad, I think I need a bit more time. I'd love to entertain the idea of going to America and figuring out what I want to do. And my dad had a bet with me. He said, okay, well, I want you, ideally you'd go to one of the universities here, Oxbridge, one of those two, Oxford or Cambridge or something like that. But if you're going to go to America, the only way I'll let you go to America is if you get into an Ivy League. I said, okay.
Wow.
And I got into Yale, and it was the single most expensive bet of his life. He's not a betting man, but I can tell you he never bet again after that, if he had ever.
Wait, Oxbridge would have been more expensive, wouldn't it?
No, not
Oxford
for bread. It was you didn't pay you didn't pay anything. You didn't at the time. Now you have to pay the minimal fee compared to American. There, as a British citizen, I'd have gone to that free.
Wait, Kevin and I went to Yale, and we didn't get to go for free. Let me tell you.
No.
That's what's crazy. It's not that doesn't exist in America. But yes, universities until very recently, in the UK, were all free for citizens and stuff. Now you pay, but compared to what we pay in the States is an absolute tiny fraction of that. So at the time, I would have been able to go to Oxford or Cambridge free of charge.
So you went.
So
he
was like, if you're gonna,
and you went into Yale in economics to become an actor. in London?
I didn't know for sure I would become an actor. What I did know is that I wasn't ready to commit to saying the next 3 years of my life, I'm going to study law or I'm going to study this. I did know that I would have 2 years to maybe try a couple of plays, maybe do my economics course, do my whatever, and just figure it out. I just needed time. And if it was going to end up being acting, well, better to be in America with this big machine of acting, that exists rather than the UK. As it happens, I could have just as easily gone to Cambridge or something and joined the Cambridge Players or something. I don't know. But for me, I needed time. And America made sense. And I'm glad I'm glad I got to Jedi the mind trick my dad into agreeing to that bet,
So you start doing film. What was your first?
Well, film was very, so yeah, to go back to how I started this is, so while at Yale, I got into theater, they do the plays and stuff. Then you go to drama school and they train you classically. There wasn't really any sort of training for camera acting in my drama school at all. And it turns out that I have an affinity for classical work, certainly Shakespeare, and I enjoy it. And the American Players Theatre hire me, and I'm doing more Shakespeare. Then I go to London, and my first gig is with the RSC, and then they know you for. Then I go to the National and work with Sir Peter Hall, and I do the back eye there, and then the RSC bring me back for Phidias, and then I go back to. It's all classical work. Then I found myself in theatre, and great directors like Sir Richard Eyre and stuff offer me. You're in theatre. I'm looking at the time for film and TV, but at the time, guys, the world of streaming has changed the landscape of television and film so drastically. And certainly the world of opening it up to people with my skin tone has really changed in the last, 10, 11 years, because I know that the reason I moved to America again, having come back to England, and I moved to America in 2012, November, back to New York. I was doing a production of Richard III that Sam Mendes had directed, and we toured around the world with, and our last stop was New York, and it was hugely successful. I was playing Buckingham, and I remember having a conversation with my agent at the time, saying, "I think it's time. It's time. If I'm ever gonna do film or TV, I need to get out of this theater comfort zone, because there's a ceiling. I can see the ceiling. I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm one of the fortunate ones. Really am in that culture, but I can see this ceiling, and I'm not being honest to myself that this is all I want as an actor. I know that to feel fulfilled, I have to have a go at doing film and TV, because my heroes, whether it's Gary Oldman or Denzel Washington or Viola Davis, I'm seeing them in movies and on TV. I have to give it a shot. So on the back of Richard III, I got my manager here in the States and stuff, and moved over. And she said to me, Meg Mortimer, she's amazing. She's still my manager now. She said to me, I will rep you, but you have to move here. None of this. At the time, what Brits would do, they'd move to LA for like 3 months and hope they score a pilot or something. She was like, none of that stuff. You're either moving here and doing it, or we're not doing it. And I moved on an A1 visa, which meant that the only way I could eat was to act, and I left the comfort zone of London theater.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but an A1 visa, meaning you couldn't work in any other field?
Other field, but as an actor. It's called an artist. It's not A1, O1, not A1, sorry. O1
no
visa,
waiting tables.
O1 visa.
I'm so
no
sorry.
Waiting tables. So no temping, no waiting tables. And it's I had to succeed as an actor, basically, to make it work. And it was a very scary time, because initially I was living off savings, and not really knowing if I could. I was competing with people who'd been doing the TV and film thing a lot longer, a lot better than I had. Does that make sense? I was hoping at some point it would click, that it would make sense. So I came into theater in New York. The public theater took over from the National and RSC for me in the States. It became my spiritual home. I did a production of Antony and Cleopatra, did it in the Barbers. Then Oscar Eustace said, I'm going to invest in you as an actor. And they brought me back, and I played Edgar and Lear with John Lithgow and Annette Bening. And then they brought me, I've worked there. So, that was within the first, and that really introduced me to the New York theater scene. And that's when I worked at the Theater for a New Audience, came back to the public, and I did a Hamlet there. And the last play I've done recently is Othello in the Park. So I really had to move to be honest with myself because there just weren't enough roles for people of color. What few were coming through that were of quality, I had to wait for Chiwetel Ejiofor, David Oyelowo, Idris Elba, and everyone to say no before I had a shot at it.
Right.
If you got a shot at it. It was a time when most of the stuff was being cast in the States, unless you were a big name and they came for you. So, like, unless you were in the States, you were missing out on most things. And streaming hadn't started yet. So there wasn't the volume.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm in the position I was in 2012 today, I probably wouldn't move to the States. I wouldn't have to, because casting is done internationally and there's more roles for people like me everywhere,
And it's all on tape now, right?
And it's all on tape. It's all on tape. And also there's just more roles. There's more, you see every project. There's we're far from being on an even playing field. Let's not pretend we're there yet, but it's moving in the right direction. At the time, it was absolutely necessary that I move over to the States if I wanted this, and that I give it a shot in the States. So that was how I started doing film. And it took a while. I got the odd guest star thing here and there. I was able to get that, but it really wasn't until, I would say, roughly around 2018 that I can comfortably say that I had made enough headroads into my ability as an actor on camera and film, and made enough a good enough impression with the casting people in camera and film to actually start thinking that I could have a career in film and TV and not predominantly just theater.
You've kind of broken through now. You're well known. Was it the Marvel? Was that what changed things for you?
Absolutely. Marvel was I'd say what really changed things for me is James Gunn. I mean, so because he hired me in Peacemaker before Marvel, which was like, had its, exposure. And it was out of Peacemaker while I was working with him that he then hired me for Guardians. But yes, I guess if you were to divide my life into two parts, there's before James Gunn and after James Gunn, so I would say Marvel is, as we know, I'm not saying anything new here, is a big game changer in people's lives, and especially playing a villain in Marvel, whereas they might go for a relative unknown to be the new Spider-Man or the new this, when they're looking for a fresh new face to do this. Usually the villains are the established actors, the William Hurts and the, you know what I mean, and stuff that they bring in to bring that to it. So I feel very lucky that James, despite having the option of doing that, chose to get me, still at the time a relative unknown, to play a role like that. And that has been very much a game changer,
Okay. London, and then Yale, and then Milwaukee, and American Players Theater, the RSC, television, well, film and streaming stuff. And finally, you're ready to do podcasts. Which is where Kevin Henderson comes in with this brilliant script for In the Cards. We had to put you through your paces. I know we auditioned you. We called you back.
How many callbacks did we do, Michael? We did.
I think it was 6.
6 callbacks.
Just you didn't quite have the voice. We didn't have the accent. Look, we were flattered, honored, floored. We our casting director, Karen Castle, was like, "What about Chukwudi Iwuji?" We're like, "Sure, Hail Mary, maybe. You never know. Stranger things have happened." And
that that boggles my mind. I'm gonna be completely honest with you that I don't know if I'll ever. I think I spoke to Kevin about this when we were doing this, and I was like, in my head, I'm a working actor, a jobbing actor. If you've done it long enough, especially in the UK, going from theater to theater, you're not going to suddenly forget you're a jobbing actor. Do you know what I mean? So the idea that there's a conversation somewhere where someone says, yeah, Hail Mary, it boggles my mind, because I'm like, of course, if it's good shit, I'd be very interested in doing it. Does that make sense? So it's very flattering to hear that. But honestly, to answer your question, I read it, I was like, oh, this is hilarious. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, this is very funny, and I didn't in any way, I just think that podcasts have a very special it draws everyone in, doesn't it? You know, it's sort of like anyone can pop up in a podcast doing it. There's such an ownership when it's this voice coming out of a recording and stuff like that. So it doesn't quite have the whole thing. Well, if it isn't surely you don't do movies that are less than $100 million budget. It doesn't have that quality in podcast. You know what I mean? It's very much about the project and the story you want to tell. You know? Yeah. I know it was close. We sort of talked. You brought it just under, right? I know you brought it just under, but I just feel that in general, when the material came to, I just thought, oh, this is very funny. I really think in terms of character. I really do. I really think when I find a character that either haven't done anything like it or I'm certain I will have fun playing, it really moves up the food chain very quickly as far as decision making. And the writing in this was very funny, very odd, very quirky. And a lot of the stuff I've done recording wise, whether it's radio plays or books, audiobooks, have tended to be quite serious, you know, kind of like deep, you know, genocide and also amazing books, but just kind of depressing. I was like, this would be great to just have a lot of fun doing something like this. So I'm really glad that your casting director suggested me and that you took that Hail Mary, you know?
Most of the people who we had come to the party, we knew, you know, and ones that we didn't know, I said to Michael, and then Michael shared this with casting director, you know, people who would want to play. And to me, that means people who come from the stage, because you're not going to want to do a project like this because of all the money that we're paying you, which is about it's going to be whether you think it's going to be fun. And the other thing was that this role that you were doing, the language is actually kind of complicated. It's
but you know what's weird? I was listening to episode 5 again, you know, and you know.
Oh God, I love episode 5.
Oh my God, I was listening to that and I was just like, you know, was it Modes of Possibility? And we were talking about, you know, the whole, and I was like, how did I get this out of my mouth? Because I was like listening to stuff. I was like, I'm sitting here having a slight sort of delayed you know, a post like breakdown going, if I was looking at this, I'd be freaking out. How did I get this out of my mouth? And it kind of worked. You know what I mean? I was like, wow.
It worked so well because those thoughts are very complicated and the sentences are very long, and and the sense of the whole paragraphs that you were saying had to be so facile. And
you'd have to be a Shakespearean actor to do what Towers does.
Yes. Well, I guess it helps. You know what? It's not even a deliberate thing. It's not like I sit there and go, let me turn on the Shakespeare sort of like sensibilities and things like that. It's just that I guess when you've done enough where you're looking at language and you're trying to make sense of internal rhythms and how to hit what you hit to make sense, you know, that's what I had to do with Towers, because you're right. You know, there was so much language with him, because there was a wonderful that's what I loved about it. There was a wonderful flamboyance about him, and there was a real brain. And one of the things we love about Shakespearean characters is how even the dumb characters are witty. You know, they've got wit and they've got quickness of thought. They've got whatever that we like about them, even when they're completely wrong and mishearing or interpreting stuff. They think they're being quick, you know. So Towers was this wonderful guy that just was ready to bounce on stuff and use the language. And you know, you gave me the note that he's flamboyant, and also I think you gave the note of he's a charismatic teacher. And when I think of the teachers that I had that I really latched onto were the ones that saw teaching as a bit of a performance, you know.
So are you a fan of podcasts? Have you listened to a lot of them?
I haven't listened to as many. Does that make sense? In fact, you guys are making me lean into it. My family really are. I sort of like, I need to trust it fully in the sense that I just love a good read. Do you know what I mean? I'm someone who looks at page, like my family all, not just podcasts, but they listen to books on, you know, audiobooks and stuff. Even though I've done audiobooks, I like a good read. So for some reason, I've always extended audiobooks to podcasts and stuff, as you know, that, oh, that's what my family love, that stuff. I keep being told about podcasts, but I'd rather just read. But it's a completely different world because it's its own sort of style of acting. Does that make sense? In fact, I've learned a lot listening to our episodes. I'm going, oh my God, it's like a whole, like when I do an audiobook, there aren't the soundscapes you guys create, or the soundtracks you guys create, or the French music, you know, things like how you have the French music that takes us off somewhere. It's a whole different world. So I will say that, and it's not just, yeah, it is predominantly for this, like learning that, oh God, there's a whole other world of this kind of podcast. You know, I listen to some, you know, historical podcasts about stuff, you know, and all that stuff every now and then. But honestly, I always chase the written word over the listened word for me in a weird way. But this is a game changer because I was like, wait, I never imagined that this is how it was going to sound when we were recording it. That it sort of
I
takes on
am
a whole
curious.
different
That
world,
is
you
my
know?
biggest. That's my biggest curiosity to the actors is what did you imagine, and how is that different with
All
what?
I
You know?
all I could hear was my voice, was me and my voice that I'm slightly bored about having lived on this earth with it my whole life, and hearing the other interactions. And then you would say, obviously, when we're recording, we're going to have a bit of, you know, we're going to throw something in here, we're going to throw some music in here, and I don't know what that's going to be. Do you know what I mean? Then suddenly you have these episodes where like you're talking and something is underscoring and growing a sound that just throws you, you know, throws it, and then it comes to life and it becomes a lot more visual, or and also it affects you sentimentally. Like, you know, there are times when Gil is talking to Nadia, and you know, Connor had, which you, I remember you pushing him to just like, you know, don't play at being a loser. Just
Just
you're
be a
going
loser.
along, and these things just keep happening to you. Does that make sense? And there's a simplicity to Connor's delivery, which I love. And then the French music will be playing, and then Nadia is the one that's animated because of him. And there's a wonderful, and it helps to the sort of almost stoic acceptance until he changes his, you know, of, and then you feel something extra for this guy in the sense that, oh yeah, it's all right, but you know, they got the stain off. It was a bad place for the stain, but they got it, you know, as opposed to commenting on that's so sad, you know. And there's something about when the music is playing underneath it, and it's like when you watch a movie, you know, Dances with Wolves wouldn't be Dances with Wolves without that score, you know,
That's
with
right.
the Buffalo Run. Yeah, the Last of the Mohicans, the whole last sequence where they're running up the hill and the music just starts playing, wouldn't be that without that score. And I think that's the equivalent of what's happening as I'm listening to this, because you're putting in this whole other character, which is the world that I was trying to imagine, but of course I could never imagine till I hear it. That's what it is. And it sort of is it fills in the little synapses, the little
Right.
awkward ways, the awkward moments I feel as an actor as I'm trying to get to beat, and it's just with my voice. And then suddenly you have this other stuff, and you go, oh, it's a bit like when you're filming, and they assure you, the director assures you, no, I've got it. I've got what I want. I know you might not feel you've nailed the whole, but I caught what I want. And then they
Right.
put it in the edit, and they put it in, and they catch it. Does that make sense? This is the equivalent of it, you know? Yeah.
Are you able to watch yourself on film?
I'm better at it than I was, because mainly because I just wasn't very good initially when I started the film, and I could see myself overacting. I could see myself
Mm.
overthinking, overacting, whatever. And even though it could fool some people that didn't know me, or are easily, we have a culture in film and TV, I think in general, that we're easily pleased. Actually, you know, we're easily impressed. We don't demand, I don't think we demand as much from our performers on screen as we demand, say, when you go to a live play, you know, the demands of it. I think there's a sense of, oh, they look the part, they've delivered the part like we expect them to deliver it, because that's how, you know, this procedural has always been. We're not looking for much more. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
I think I was able to get away with certain things because I didn't make a disaster of it. But when I was watching it, I didn't see myself being particularly believable. So I struggled initially. Then as I've become more comfortable with it, as I've been willing to take more risks with it, sort of thought of it in the same way I think of theater when I'm performing. I've been able to watch myself more because I can now at least assess what I'm doing. Even when I feel I overdid that bit, I can see the modulations and a lot more ease, and I can almost fall back and watch the story and not worry about the next time I come on. Does that make sense? I'm getting better at it.
Yeah. Theater demands all of this physicality. Film, you're saying, is much more subtle, less.
Mm.
Where does podcast fall in?
it doesn't, it demands a specificity in your vocal range and your thinking that's exhausting. Um, in a perfectly good demanding way. I feel it doesn't. Whereas I can see the natural progression with theater and TV and back the sort of the circular connection between the two of them. They're sort of related. I think acting predominantly with your voice, which I've experienced when doing audiobooks and stuff, is a completely different, very exhausting, demanding challenge mentally also. The first thing that's mentally challenging about it is reading every word accurately. When I read, I didn't realize how much of a skimmer I am when I read. We know what the sentence is probably gonna say, and we're throwing words in there every now and then. Do you know what I mean? That's how we get through it. But you can't do that. You know, Kevin's written that word. Its alliteration is it's rhythmic. It's a kind of humor. It belongs to Philadelphia. You know, little things like that you can't. The specificity alone of reading every word correctly with audio, this is at least my experience, is how do I let them know if they were watching me, that's what I would be doing? Do you know what I mean? One way is to actually do the action, but sometimes that isn't enough. Sometimes you have to just be, it's hard to explain. You have to almost listen to yourself and sort of observe yourself and then deliver it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
If you know, when Kevin would say no, he's angry, you know, in one of my tirades with Gil, if I'm angry on stage or on camera, I know the camera is gonna come in and catch it in my eyes. Or if I'm on stage, I know how I can use pure like anger and vocal state on with the mic there and stuff. How do I think I'm angry? I have to think, I have to find other layers in that. It's like, oh, like condescending this little piece of whatever, and put that all before I speak. Does that make sense? So I find it deeply, deeply challenging and mentally exhausting, because in a good way, because I have to find a way to express that for the ear alone and sort of like stimulate a visual imagination from the way they hear it. Whereas when I'm performing on film or TV, you have the bonus of seeing me do it. So I stimulate you physically also. There's one more phase to go through with audio stuff that is a real wonderful challenge. And I'm hoping will feed into my other acting also, of knowing how you can, you know, you can do that all without maybe even moving, you know? Does that make sense what I just said?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have with the play on Shakespeare stuff, we always tell our cast, twirl the mustache. That sort of like, when you've got the sort of the super villain, that sort of curses foiled again, that sort of really being on the nose in the performance with what's happening emotionally, vocally.
Yeah.
Which we don't do for film, definitely, and theater.
No, sometimes. We don't, because we have so much other things to rely on for it, that it's slightly to trust that, the biggest fear was, am I playing a stereotype of the character? Am I being stereotypical charismatic professor? Am I actually, is this real? Does that make sense? Because you have to find a way of sounding that way in a way that you don't in other mediums.
I have another question for you. You said you got to dream your Hamlet when you were working at RSC. Have you gotten to play Hamlet?
I did. I played Hamlet at the Public. It started with the mobile unit. We went to, prisons and community centers, and
oh wow,
the most extraordinary experiences doing Hamlet. I remember I was in Rikers prison one day, and about to do to be or not to be, and I was about to sort of shoot myself in the arm with some heroin or an overdose or something. And I remember saying to be or not to be, and looking up at the front row, there was a guy sat there, and he just looked at me and shook his head and mouthed, "Don't do it. Don't do it." It's not what, that sort of connection with people, that I was in a women's homeless shelter and I started to be or not to be. And this homeless woman with all her bags near her seat went, "That is the question." And she did the speech with me.
Oh.
And that play, everyone's it's touched people's lives somehow. And to know that we didn't have to make it any easier, clarify it, make it, simplify the text. You could go with the complication of the text, but living in the idea, the thoughts, the specificity was enough for them because they followed it. The applause we would get from prisoners who understood being trapped, you know what I mean? And then by the time we took it to the public, proper to the quote unquote regular audience, all those experiences were in my performance. And it was Hamlet is the only role that I've ever finished the run of that I was sad it was over. It's the only role I've ever wanted to return to, that it was unfinished business because there was so much in the character. So I dreamt my Hamlet watching it. And when I played it, I was ready for it like I've never been ready for anything before. I think I was off book by the time we started day one, because I was, yeah. I was, it was when I got the go ahead, when Oscar Eustace called to say the go ahead, I was like, okay, I've actually been waiting for this for most of my life, So it was just a joy.
It's kind of the entirety of the human experience journey.
And also the entirety for the artist experience. Right. That's what's weird. The performer, he gives a speech about how to act. So are you doing that when you tell them, suit the action to the word, are you doing that? It's just like layers upon layers. And then even now, I did it in 2016. Even now, 7 years later, I'm sitting there and going, oh, damn it. That's how that one, you know what I mean? It still comes to me. You're just sitting there randomly for no reason. You just go, oh, yeah. Okay.
So you said you had a Richard Burton story.
Yes. When I was 10, I was living in Ethiopia and Addis Ababa. My parents worked for the United Nations. And there was terrible television. So really, we lived off this black market of exchanging VHS tapes and watching movies that people recorded and stuff. That's how you did it. And one of the movies that arrived in our home was Becket with Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole, the movie, Jean Anouilh. And I was obsessed. I was 10 and I was obsessed with this film. I watched it so much so that the tape, when it thinned out and started shaking, it started doing it because I watched it. It drove my younger sister nuts. She was like, why are we watching this instead of you're 10? What's the deal with this period drama and what a... So anyway, I was obsessed because I loved Richard Burton and I realized I loved the chemistry with him and Peter O'Toole, and I loved the grandness of the performances. I loved the still fires of Richard Burton and the flamboyance of Peter O'Toole. So fast forward 10 years later, I'm at Yale and I've decided that, okay, it's time I need to get into theater here while I'm here. And I'm walking across campus or something and I see a poster for Becket. There's a poster of the play. And I go and the girl I was dating at the time said, I just saw this and I used to watch the movie and I love, and she goes, oh, my friend is the director of that and he is looking for his leads. You got to go audition. I said, and I was like, okay. So I said, I'm going to go audition. And I'm going in for the Henry role, the Peter O'Toole role, because it's more flamboyant. I went in for the audition and Owen Hughes looked at me and just had me read just Becket. All the actors would come in and do Becket. And then he offered me the role of Becket. And it was that opening night of that show that James DePaul came to see that made him offer me a scholarship to drama school. And that's a true story. That's a true story. And the only reason I went for that audition is because of that film I used to watch in Ethiopia as a 10-year-old.
Yeah, I always tell people that the biggest enemy to artistic endeavor is a good job.
Yeah. And can you imagine? It's just, especially the jobs you get offered out. It was my former professor, economics professor. He'd become a consultant at McKinsey. I hadn't even applied to McKinsey. And I got a phone call from McKinsey one day. Like it was a couple of weeks after James offered me the scholarship. One day basically saying, just fill out your form and we'll leave the rest to us. And I remember just sitting there thinking, I'm about to turn down like 100, whatever it was, to go, get like so much money, my New York apartment and everything, to go to drama school. And I just remember taking a moment and then going to the woman on the phone. Yeah, thank you, ma'am, but I'm going to drama school. And there was a long pause on the phone, and she just went, and then no, but it was so sweet. After she just went, you know what? good for you, sir. I remember her saying that, and chills. You know what I mean? She
Wow.
said that. I was like, wow. She said, you know what? And she lowered her voice as if she didn't want the rest of HR to hear something. She was like, you know what? Good for you, sir. I was like, oh, that's a sign out of nowhere, you know?
Are you still in touch with your econ buddies, friends from Yale?
Oh yeah, a lot of my friends that went into, I'm still in touch with them, and they've all, you know, it's weird. When I chose to go into acting, none of them were like, "You're crazy, you're nuts."
Mhm.
They probably were like thinking it, but what they said to me was like, "Go for it. Of course, you're gonna want to be an actor, Chuck. Go for it." They were not. They would travel to London to see my shows. You know,
Wow.
from anything from a fringe show and behind a pub to like something at the National. They traveled with it to support. And now, do you know what's weird? We started this with Guardians. We're finishing with Guardians. The fact they're taking their kids to Guardians and they're saying that's Uncle Chuck, that's our friend. Do you know what I mean? There's such a what. That's been the biggest. Because when you're in it, guys, it's very hard when people ask you how does it feel and all that. It feels like it feels because you're in the middle of it and you're jobbing, you're working, you're looking towards the next job, you're dealing with a strike. You're
Yeah.
also there's the reality of it. But when it's the others, whether it be my family or my friends, and they talk about their kids going, or they send me a picture of them at the theater in front of a poster with their kids, and then it then it makes sense. Then it makes sense the bigness of it. Other than that, it's you're in it. You're too much in it to know it. But it's the effect it has on those you love that really is the real litmus test for this for me.
This went super
Thank
long,
you.
and you gave us so much of your time.
But really, I mean, on my end, I had such a great time playing. It was a learning curve performance-wise for me. And like I said, I have a feeling the specifics of that is going to bleed into my work in general, but it was just such a joy, and never even hesitate to pick up the phone because I loved working with you guys, the whole team, it was a joy.
Great. Well, you were
And I'm
fantastic.
glad the podcast is going down so well that people are loving it.
Yeah.
5-star reviews everywhere. So I'm so
Yeah, I
so
just
glad to hear
read
that. See
yesterday
that.
that we're number one in Sri Lanka. So there you go.
Hey, we're number
Who
one
thought?
worldwide.
We're number one. It is a bit mysterious though how you put something good out there and it just finds its way. I mean, it's been
Yeah.
it's been astonishing to me how this has just bled everywhere. So it's
Yeah.
fascinating.
And people really responding to it and seeing the characters they talk about them like they've seen them, and that's a real bonus to me and stuff. And no, it's beautiful. It's really beautiful, and I'm very, very proud to have been part of it. I'm really glad for you guys because one thing you kept saying was like, we don't know how this is gonna work. We don't know how it's gonna go down. Well, we're finding out.
I can't resist. One last
Yeah.
thing. Did you do?
Yeah.
Have you done improv?
No, improv terrifies me. It's literally terrifies the hell out of me. Nothing scares me more than when in rehearsal someone says to you, the director says, "Okay, just improv this scene." And the weird thing about it is I know it would be great for me to do it. I know I should do it. I know I should put myself there, but I have never done it officially. I have the biggest stand-up comedians and improv artists for me are like the crazy ones, the ones that are doing the uber stunts. Do you know what I mean? For me as a performer.
Then I'm not going to ask you to jump back into your Peter Towers costume and give us an outro scolding.
Oh God, Peter! How would Peter Towers say? Well, I'm glad that I was able to relate to this sort of lowbrow comedy. But congratulations on your part. I'm glad that the masses are enjoying this, and I wouldn't exactly say it defines my future, but having tasted of your trivial, talents, it's fun to have at least made you feel a bit more important in this world for a very small time. How's that?
That was pretty darn
That
good.
was damn good. I think you can do improv, and you've just been keeping it hidden from the world. That's where you're headed next. Watch out, Upright Citizens Brigade.
Take care, guys. And I'm still looking forward to that drink in New York at some point.
Oh,
Yeah.
heck, it's happening.
We'll do
Let's
it.
do it.
You've been listening to In the Cards bonus content series. You can learn more about In the Cards at Next Chapter Podcast website, ncpodcasts.com. That's N as in next, C as in chapter, podcast with an S at the end.com, where you can find other series like the Play On podcast series and interviews, along with talk podcasts like the 500, Indecent with Kiki Anderson, Beef with Bridget Todd, and a whole lot more. I'd love I'd like to thank Jeremiah Tittle, the founder of Next Chapter Podcast, and our producer, Pete Musto. Our audio engineer, editor, and sound designer is Justin Cortese. Be sure to subscribe to Next Chapter Podcast for updates on all the latest content, and don't forget to rate and review our shows and subscribe. It really, really helps. I'm Michael Goodfriend with Kevin Henderson, and I look forward to sharing more incredible works in the Next Chapter Podcast bonus content series with you, along with lots of enlightening interviews at Next Chapter Podcast.